Egypt warns it will not accept imposed realities or threats to its existential interests. Israel's foreign minister says Tel Aviv is interested in ending the war in Gaza based on Trump's proposal. And Egypt's foreign minister discusses cooperation between Tehran and the IAEA with his Iranian counterpart. You're watching Q News at 4 with me, Henny Saif, and these are the news today. Egypt has addressed the UN Security Council regarding Ethiopia's unilateral actions on the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, stressing they violate international law and directly threaten Egypt's sovereign rights over the Nile. In a statement by the Foreign Ministry, Cairo rejected Ethiopia's unilateral measures, affirming they undermine regional stability and pose risks to international peace and security. Egypt reiterated its commitment to diplomacy and fair cooperation, rooted in principles of equitable use and avoidance of significant harm, but warned it will not accept imposed realities or threats to its existential rights and interests. The statement underscored Egypt's firm resolve to defend its vital rights under international law and the UN Charter. Now let's move on to the latest developments in Gaza.
والله العظيم ولا حبة رز، والله العظيم ولا حبة عدس. ما فيش أكل، ما فيش شرب، عندي بنت 2.5 صارت تشرب.
Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar has stated that Tel Aviv is interested in ending the war in Gaza based on the proposal put forward by US President Donald Trump. Saar made these remarks during a meeting with the Croatian Prime Minister in Zagreb. They discussed bilateral relations and the broader Middle East situation, with a particular focus on the conflict in Gaza. Saar emphasized that Israel seeks to conclude the war according to Trump's plan and the principles set by Israel's security cabinet. He reiterated Israel's stance that it does not intend to maintain long-term control over Gaza.
Which understand that peace will be achieved.
The Israeli occupation army has ordered the immediate evacuation of Gaza City residents, instructing them to flee south via the Rashid corridor ahead of what it called large-scale military operations in the area. The announcement has raised fears of a new wave of mass displacement as artillery shelling and airstrikes continued across the Gaza Strip. Overnight, Israeli forces bombarded central Khan Yunis in the south, while drones opened fire on civilian homes. Heavy bombing also hit residential neighborhoods in northern and central Gaza, causing widespread destruction. In Gaza City, several civilians were injured following an airstrike on an apartment building near Al-Qawqa roundabout in the Al-Shati refugee camp. Dozens of Palestinians protested in central Gaza City, vowing to remain despite Israeli evacuation orders. Gathering in Al-Saraya Square, protesters raised flags and signs declaring their determination to stay. Israel dropped leaflets urging residents to flee to the overcrowded Al-Mawasi area in the south, ahead of an expected ground assault. Many residents say they have nowhere safe to go. Gaza's health ministry announced plans to evacuate Al-Shifa and Al-Ahli hospitals, but said doctors would not abandon patients. Hamas has condemned Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for overseeing the destruction of residential buildings in Gaza City, calling it the most brutal manifestation of a war criminal as Israeli airstrikes continue across the besieged territory. Netanyahu later confirmed that 50 high-rise towers had been destroyed over the past 2 days, warning the strikes were just a prelude to an expanded ground offensive. In a statement, Hamas accused Israel of committing a criminal act of forced transfer under threat of bombardment, famine and death, urging the international community to take stronger action to stop what it described as war crimes. Earlier, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has urged Gaza residents to evacuate immediately. Netanyahu announced that 50 buildings in Gaza were destroyed within 2 days, emphasizing this is only the beginning of a larger military operation. He also described what's happening in Gaza City as the beginning of an intense offensive. He confirmed Israeli troops are currently assembling in Gaza City to commence a ground assault. And Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has stated that the situation in Gaza is worsening daily, with Israel destroying entire areas to make life impossible. In response, Spain has halted arms trade with Israel. It's leading an international effort to recognize a Palestinian state and has approved a series of measures against the genocide of the Palestinians. These actions include allocating 150 million euros for humanitarian aid in Gaza, increasing contributions to UNRWA by 10 million euros, and banning Israeli settlement imports. Spain also decided to bar Israeli ministers Ben Gvir and Smotrich from entering the country and to provide financial and project support to the Palestinian Authority.
Sepa y sienta que ante uno de los episodios más infames del siglo XXI, su país, España, estuvo en el lado correcto de la historia. Muchas gracias. Medios de comunicación por dar cobertura a esta declaración institucional.
Hundreds gathered in Barcelona urging the Spanish government to impose a total arms embargo on Israel following Madrid's recent decision to ban weapons shipments to the country. The demonstration came a day after Spain blocked ships and aircraft carrying arms or military-grade jet fuel to Israel from using Spanish ports or airspace, citing Israel's ongoing offensive in Gaza. Protesters called for the measures to go further, demanding the embargo cover all military-related imports and exports in the government's upcoming royal decree. And for more, we now move to Hela Al-Hamalawi in our newsroom. Hela.
Thank you so much, Hani. For further analysis, we're joined from Cairo by Al-Ahram newspaper managing editor, Mr. Ashraf Al-Ashri. Welcome to Q News. Mr. Ashraf, how does the Israeli Foreign Minister's endorsement of the Trump plan align with the stated goals of Israel's security cabinet, particularly regarding the post-war administration of Gaza?
Certainly there is some type of alignment between the American side and their Israeli counterparts, because they provided no guarantees, no sufficient guarantees that can result in an Israeli retreat or withdrawal from the lands they occupied after October 7th. And there is a precedent in the release of prisoners and also in America's promises to provide aid. And we hope that it evolves into some type of development in regard to the release of prisoners, but there must be guarantees. Also, minutes ago, an action occurred where the Israelis bombarded several of Hamas's sites, and they were successful in assassinating leaders of Hamas. And they keep targeting key figures from Hamas.
And considering the conflicting statements from Israel and Spain, how do these divergent perspectives, one focused on a specific peace plan and the other on humanitarian crisis and genocide, actually reflect the current state of international diplomacy regarding the Gaza conflict?
The international community is not consistent on its stance in regard to the humanitarian aid during the times of conflict or war. You have Spain, the Netherlands, France, all said they are willing to recognize Palestine and willing to stop Israel in its tracks. On the contrary, no clear action is done. That's why the killings and genocide continues. So the UN Security Council and the international community must hold a firm stance against Israel. But on the ground, there is a contradiction in the international community stances, and we cannot say that it will there will be an end for this ongoing catastrophe and tragedy in Palestine.
Mr. Ashraf, I would like you to stay with us, but now we have some breaking news. Please stay with us, because now we're going to watch on the screen as Reuters has reported several blasts were heard in Qatar's Doha, and smoke, as we can see, rising over the Qatara district in the capital, according to eyewitnesses. Multiple explosions rocked Doha, Qatar's capital, with reports confirming that Israeli airstrikes targeting the Qatara district. At least 10 blasts were reported, with a column of smoke rising above the area, as we can see from live footage now. Ladies and gentlemen, we can see now live footage on the screen, reports of multiple explosions heard in Doha, columns of smoke rising from the Qatari capital, and reports of Israeli strikes on the Qatari capital, Doha. Now, Mr. Ashraf Al-Ashri, if you are still with me, can you please comment on this breaking news? We have just seen live footage of smoke rising from the Qatari capital, Doha, as a result of explosions, reportedly as a result of airstrikes by Israel on Qatar. What's your comment on that, sir? Unfortunately, we lost Mr. Ashraf Al-Ashri. He is Al-Ahram newspaper managing editor. But thank you so much, sir, for joining us on Q News. And now we go back to Hani Saif in our studio. To you, Hani.
Thank you, Hela. In response to a Jerusalem attack, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz has ordered civil sanctions against the families and communities of the perpetrators. The assault carried out by two Palestinians using two cars and a locally made machine gun killed and wounded Israelis, causing widespread panic. The attackers, from villages near Ramallah, entered through a security fence gap and fired on people at a bus stop after failing to board a bus with Israeli soldiers and rabbis. In the aftermath, Israeli forces closed crossings, established a security cordon, and conducted raids in multiple West Bank villages. Quds's new measures include demolishing illegal buildings and revoking 750 work permits. The global Samud flotilla, aiming to deliver aid to Gaza, claimed one of its main boats was hit by a drone at Tunisia's Sidi Bou Said port. Tunisia's Interior Ministry, however, denied the claims, saying there was no drone strike and that a fire broke out on board. The Portuguese-flagged vessel carrying the flotilla's steering committee suffered fire damage to the main and lower decks. At least 83 Palestinians have been killed and 223 were injured in the past 24 hours in the Gaza Strip. The total death toll since October 2023 has climbed to 64,605, with over 163,000 wounded. Medical officials say the majority of the victims are women and children. Hospitals also reported 5 more deaths due to starvation and malnutrition, bringing the total number of such fatalities to 387, including 138 children, highlighting the growing humanitarian crisis in the enclave. Egypt's Foreign Minister Badr Abdulati has met with his Iranian counterpart Abbas Araghchi to discuss ways to strengthen bilateral ties, regional developments and cooperation between Iran and the International Atomic Energy Agency. According to Egypt's Foreign Ministry, talks address deepening relations and the latest on Iran's nuclear file, with Egypt facilitating dialogue between Tehran and the IAEA. The two foreign ministers praised recent contacts, affirming commitment to continued consultations, especially on economic, trade and tourism cooperation. They also reviewed regional crises, including Gaza, stressing the urgent need to halt Israeli aggression and reject Palestinian displacement. Araghchi's visit to Cairo includes talks with the IAEA chief to finalize a new framework regulating Iran's commitments under international agreements. Ladies and gentlemen, as mentioned earlier, we have the breaking news right now. We can see that the Israeli occupation army has announced targeting Hamas leaders in Qatar with an airstrike. They added that Air Force precisely struck them That came after Reuters has reported several blasts were heard in Qatar's Doha. Smoke was seen rising over the Qatara district in the capital, according to an eyewitness. Multiple explosions rocked Doha, Qatar's capital, with reports confirming Israeli airstrikes targeting the Qatara district. At least 10 blasts were heard and reported, with a column of smoke rising above the area. And now we are joined from Cairo by the international relations expert, Dr. Mohammed Osman. Dr. Osman, what is your comment on such a move?
Thank you for having me, Hani. To start with, I am speechless. No one would have ever conceived that this would actually happen, that Qatar, a key ally of the United States in the region that hosts the largest U.S. military base in the world, will be targeted by any state in the world, and let alone Israel, a country that has a history of coordination with the United States and Qatar as well. Qatar is a mediator in the current, along with Egypt, in the current war in Gaza between the Palestinian factions and Israel. So it's rather inconceivable that Israel would go ahead and carry out such a blatant, unwarranted escalation against a sovereign state, even if it's under the pretext of attempting to target Hamas leadership or what remains of Hamas's leadership in Doha. It is a blatant violation of international law, and it just shows how little the United States is really willing to apply on Israel in order to deter them or to stop them or contain their madness and their lust for carnage and blood at this point, because it is completely inconceivable that they would take such an unwarranted escalation. And it raises so many questions right now. It raises questions about the future, for starters, of the Trump initiative to stop the war or his proposal. It also raises a lot of questions about Qatar's position and the Arab position in general in the mediation process, as it eradicates all of the bridges of trust and confidence between all the stakeholders and all the parties. And it also puts the concept of a U.S. alliance in itself with any given country into question. So what safety does this U.S. alliance or U.S. security guarantees give to a certain ally like Qatar when they are targeted by a U.S. ally, another U.S. ally, and that is Israel? Truly, Hani, this is, and I could not even imagine that something like this would happen.
Well, then how does this incident, in terms of the timing and nature of it, relate to previous regional military episodes involving Qatar, such as the June 23rd missile intercepts over Doha? Do you think the U.S. was well aware and informed before these Israeli strikes take place?
It could very well be so. I would be surprised if the United States did this without informing, if Israel did this without informing the United States. Because naturally, if this did happen, if they did that unilaterally without informing the U.S., this should have very strong repercussions for the Israelis if they did this without an American green light, or at least without the tacit consent of the United States. And I also believe that such an attack is designed to destroy any possibility of ending the war in Gaza. Right now, Hamas was positively responding to Israel's, to the United States or President Trump's proposal for a ceasefire and a detainee exchange deal that was more flexible, even though it contained zero guarantees. However, Hamas was being much more realistic and pragmatic and responsible. So when it appeared that Hamas's agreement to Trump's terms were imminent and that Israel might actually have to abide by a ceasefire or a cessation of hostilities, they went ahead as usual and torpedoed these efforts. But this time, I believe, Hani, they went too far. Because it has been even reported that the Hamas leadership who were allegedly targeted, of course, we have a very fluid situation right now. We do not have any solid information. However, if this report turned out to be true, that the Hamas leadership targeted were actually convening to discuss a positive response to Trump's proposal, this would be a huge offense even to the United States and U.S. efforts to end the war, or U.S. alleged efforts at least to end this war.
In what ways could these blasts influence then Qatar's geopolitical posture, especially considering its pivotal role as host to U.S. military bases, notably the Al Udeid Air Base, and its balancing relationship between Western powers and regional actors like Iran also being involved in the mediation efforts? Where does it put it?
It jeopardizes Qatar's position as a mediator, and it jeopardizes also its very peculiar geopolitical position, because Qatar at this point right now has been violated and attacked. Actually, even if the target was Hamas, it did happen in the Qatari capital, in a huge violation of Qatari sovereignty and international law, of course. So if this actually puts Qatar to the test and actually turns them from a mediator to an opponent, basically, at this point, because they have just carried out an act of war against Qatar. Let's call a spade a spade. Of course, Qatar does not have the capability to respond to such an attack as far as we know. I do not think that things will go that far. Of course, there will be condemnations. There will be a huge wave of Arab and even international solidarity with Qatar in the egregious violation they have been subjected to. However, I do question the position of the United States. As you just said, the United States hosts Al Udeid Air Base, Qatar, the largest U.S. base abroad. So I cannot imagine that Israel would dare attack a country that is very strategic in the network of alliances of the United States in the region and the world without a U.S. And if that did happen, we should expect a very, very strong U.S. response to Israel's actions. However, if we never see this strong U.S. response, it means only one thing. It means that the Americans greenlit or at least tacitly approved Israel's attacks on the grounds that they were targeting what the U.S. considers a terrorist organization.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's try to link a few things together, especially with the timing of it. Could this strike be related to Israel's announced expanded military offensive in Gaza and the statements by the Israeli foreign minister that they would only end the war in Gaza under Trump's proposal?
Without question. Of course it is. It is directed, and just as I told you a few moments ago, this attack is designed to destroy and sabotage and torpedo the U.S. initiative to end the war. I think that Israel wants to go ahead with its expansion of the military operation in Gaza to attack, carry out a ground assault on Gaza City and obliterate the city basically and wipe it off the map as part of their strategy to depopulate the Gaza Strip. This is the end game, Hani. So I think that the Israelis will stop at nothing to achieve their genocidal aims, and apparently they are going now as far as attacking Qatar, something that, as I just said, until a few moments ago, I thought was completely inconceivable.
Well, what risks does Israel now take in alienating Qatar, a key broker in detainee negotiations and ceasefire talks? Does that mean that they gave up on the whole thing?
Of course it means that. Israel just attacked a mediator. You see, this is what we have descended to. Attacking a sovereign state that is mediating the conflict upon your own request. This was Israel's request. The Israelis wanted Arab stakeholders, along with the Americans, to mediate the conflict with Hamas. So now you go ahead and you attack Qatar, a country that they maintain unofficial diplomatic relations with, that they maintain trade relations and economic relations with, basically a country that was in a state of quasi-normalization with Israel since for more than a couple of decades now. So this is how Qatar is to be rewarded, for being a mediator, for attempting to resolve the conflict and play a role in resolving the conflict between Israel and Hamas, or Israel and the Palestinian resistance. It is completely unacceptable, and it also alienates the entirety of the Arab world. No one will trust Israel now. Even those countries that went ahead and signed the Abrahamic Accords with Israel will be outraged by such actions. I expect Egypt as well to be completely outraged and angered by such a blatant Israeli provocation and violation of Qatari sovereignty and of Arab sovereignty in general. This unwarranted aggression by the Israelis now knows no bounds, and Israel has become a threat to regional stability and regional security. They are acting like a rogue state. If we speak of a textbook definition of a rogue state right now, we should not speak of North Korea or Iran or Russia. We should speak of Israel, because what they are doing, the actions that they are undertaking, are the rogue actions that are expected to be classified as such.
Well, speaking of the rest of the Arab world, one final question. How might other Gulf states then interpret this Israeli strike on Qatari soil? Would it be seen as a precedent for similar cross-border actions or a violation of their own sovereignty?
I don't think they would violate any other country's sovereignty if those countries do not host Hamas operatives or Hamas leadership or leadership of the Palestinian factions in general. So I do not believe that Qatar was the target. However, Qatar's sovereignty was not taken into consideration. And Israel did issue warnings before that they will target Hamas operatives abroad in other countries that they are in. However, would they dare do such the same thing with a country like Turkey, who is hosting Hamas leadership as well? However, Turkey is a country with a gargantuan military, with a huge military, and that can that is able to defend itself adequately. However, coming back to the Gulf countries, I think that they will be concerned, and I think that now they will reconsider their approaches or accepting to expand normalization and peace, normalizations of relations, and signing further peace treaties. I think this entire thing will be revisited after Israel's act of madness earlier today.
We will be closely following the developments that will be taking place for the rest of the day. That was the international relations expert, Dr. Mohammed Osman. Dr. Osman, thank you very much, sir, for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, Israel carried out an attack against the Hamas leadership in Doha after an explosion was heard and filmed in the Qatari capital. The Israeli occupation issued a statement that it had targeted senior leadership of Hamas with a precise strike in a joint operation with the Shin Bet security agency. These were the main stories and news we have for now, but here's a quick reminder of the stories we've been covering. Egypt warns it will not accept imposed realities or threats to its existential interests. Israel's foreign minister says Tel Aviv is interested in ending the war in Gaza based on Trump's proposal. And Egypt's foreign minister discusses cooperation between Tehran and the IAEA with his Iranian counterpart. This concludes our news bulletin for now, but please don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at QNewsEGY to stay informed. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates here on Q News. We'll keep you updated on the latest developments after the Israeli attack on the Qatari capital.